In this video, I'm going to show you 5 ways I adapted to hiking the desert section of the Pacific Crest Trail. Let's go! Although I had quite a bit of backpacking experience going into our 2021 PCT thru hike attempt, none of it was in the desert. And I can tell you that the Southern California desert is much different than hiking in the mountains. And it can quickly punch you in the mouth if you're not prepared. And punch me in the mouth it did. But I was able to make some changes quickly and adapt and turn the desert into one of the best and most favorite places I've ever hiked. So here are 5 ways that I adapted. Number 1 was I increased my intake of electrolytes. Now, salt and electrolytes play a really important part in the overall health of your body and how you feel when you're doing any type of a long distance endurance activity, like long distance running or backpacking. And if you run low or run out of salt, you just feel miserable. You feel tired and exhausted and weak. Like even walking 20 feet just seems like the most impossible task in the world. But luckily, it's very, very easy to manage and do something about. So what my approach was is I alternated 1 liter of water and 1 liter of electrolyte drink throughout the day. And that made a huge difference. So here's some examples of some of the different electrolyte drinks that we used, all of which seemed like they were effective. We used Noon tablets, Liquid IV, Goo Roctane, and not pictured as just standard Gatorade. Once we started doing this, we felt a lot better during the day and it made our hike much more enjoyable. The second way we adapted was to start doing the bulk of our miles outside of the hottest parts of the day. Hiking in the mornings and evenings in the desert is just awesome. It's dry, it's cool, it's so great for hiking, just beautiful. However, the middle part of the day can be quite the opposite and even can be a little bit dangerous. We did run across one hiker who was suffering from heat exhaustion. We heard stories of others that had to press the emergency beacons on their inReach devices and get help from the search and rescue team. So the heat is no joke and you really have to respect it. What we found is that typically it got pretty hot around 11 a.m. through about 4 p.m. And that varied a little bit from day to day. Some days it was hot by 9:30, 10 o'clock. And when you're up in the mountains, sometimes it didn't really get all that hot at all and you could hike all day. But here was our approach. We'd get up early, say 6 a.m. or something like that. And there were people even earlier than that. Sometimes we'd be laying in our tent and you'd hear people walking by like 4:30 in the morning. So people do get up pretty early. And we get up to start hiking, and then we'd hike until it started to get warm, and then we'd take a break. This can be a great time of day to take the time to eat a nice long lunch, dry out any gear that got wet overnight, or just hang out with friends, catch up on email, take a nap, whatever. There's all kinds of stuff to do during this break time. And it may sound a little bit boring, but some of the best times that we had on trail was this long afternoon break where we were just hanging out with everybody, telling stories, having a good old time, and it was really quite a bit of fun. And then when it started to cool down in the afternoon, anywhere between 3 and 5 p.m., depending on the day, you strap on your pack and you start hiking again. Another thing that we did a couple of times is take another late afternoon, early evening break to cook dinner while we were still on trail. And what that allowed us to do is hike further into the evening without having to worry about having so much to do when we got to camp. And basically that just helps maximize the amount of time that you're hiking in the best weather. Night hiking is another option. And if the moon is full or close to full, it's pretty easy to hike at night. And with a headlamp, you can see where you're going, no problem at all. And you're hiking in absolutely great conditions then. The bottom line here is our goal was to minimize the amount of time that we were hiking in the hot part of the day and maximize the amount of time we were hiking and it was nice and cool out. The third way we adapted was to carefully manage and optimize our water carries. In other words, don't carry too much water, but also don't carry too little water. Now, water weighs about 2.2 pounds per liter. So if you can save an extra liter or two, you can save 2 to 4 pounds pretty easily if you're managing your water carries correctly. And if you think about how much work people go into saving just a few ounces off their base weight by saving pounds by managing water correctly, that can be a real benefit to you. A very important part of optimizing your use of water is to understand how much you're going to go through during the day. And this can vary greatly depending upon the conditions. So here's an example. If it is really hot and we're doing some uphill hiking, I can easily go through a liter of water in 2.5 to 3 miles. However, if it's in the evening or morning and it's very cool out, I can go 8 to 10 miles or more on 1 liter. So let's just take an example of doing a 20-mile water carry. You can see just by understanding how much water my body needs during the hot or cool parts of the day, either I'm going to be needing to carry 6+ liters or as little as 2.5 liters for the same amount of mileage. So understanding what you're going to go through is super important to optimizing the amount of water you're going to carry. So how do you do this? It really just comes through experience. You got to get out there and hike and learn how much water you need in the various conditions. And then you just manage it that way. Another part of managing your water is to understand how much you're going to need for dry camping. Dry camping is when you are camping without access to a water source. For me, I usually go through about 3/4 of a liter over the course of one evening and morning of dry camping. So that's water I use for cooking dinner, for brushing my teeth, for washing up, that kind of stuff. It can vary a little bit depending on how much I need for the particular meal that I'm cooking that night, but that's about how much I need. Here's an example. If I knew that I needed 2 liters of water to get to the next water source in the morning, and I was going to be dry camping the night before, I would need to have 2 3/4 liters of water going into camp that night. 3/4 for the dry camping to get me to the next day, and then 2 liters in the morning to get me to that next water source. Another part of managing your water carries is really paying attention to the crowdsourced information that's available. And what I'm talking about here are 2 things on the PCT, and that's the Gut Hook app and the PCT water report. Both of those are great sources to know what's happening out on the trail. Are the streams dry? Are the water caches full? Is a stream running really well? Is it got foul tasting water? All that kind of stuff is really helpful to know. So you just look at that throughout the day and it can help you plan out where you're going to get your next water. But with that being said, I'd say rely on water caches at your own risk because they aren't always reliable. Here's a great example. We were looking at the Gut Hook app and it said with a comment dated today, hey, there's 50 gallons of water up ahead at the next cache. Like, wow, that's a ton of water. So we get there the very next day and there was none left. Now, luckily we had enough to get to the next water source, so we were fine. But if we completely relied on that thing, that could have been a problem. The 4th way that we learned to adapt was to be wind aware. It can get very, very windy in the desert section of the PCT. During the daytime, it's really just more of a nuisance when you're walking through these ridiculous winds. But at night, it can make it very difficult to sleep, or secondly, even worse, it can damage your tent. The way we managed this was to check the Gut Hook app for comments about is this site good or bad in the wind, because people are really good about putting kind of a wind rating by the different campsites, and also looking for a little bit of shelter. You can kind of get a feel after a while for what sites are going to be bad in the wind and what are not. And there were nights where we went to bed and it was completely calm, and in the middle of the night it was just, our tents were shaking from all the wind. So it can change very quickly. So the more you're prepared and the more you're thinking about it, the better off you're going to be when you're camping in the wind. The last way that I adjusted was to make some equipment changes. Number 1 is I bought a water bottle holder for the front of my pack. It just straps onto the strap of your pack and it keeps your water right there handy for you, because you drink so much more water in the desert than what you normally would when you're backpacking. It's just nice to have it handy and right there. The other equipment change I made was to get a sun umbrella. Now, I didn't use the sun umbrella as much as I thought I would after I bought it, but the times I did need it, I would say it was priceless. There were a few times that it was so hot and we were stuck with no shade, and that sun umbrella really did the trick. So, fair question, will I carry the sun umbrella with me next year on the PCT? I honestly don't know the answer to that question right now. I'm leaning toward taking it with me, but it might end up being one of those pieces of equipment that gets sent home. So if you watched my PCT videos from 2021, you know that when Callan and I started out in the desert, we were having a little bit of a rough go of it. It wasn't the worst, but there were a few days where it was a little bit rough. But after we adapted and made the changes I mentioned in this video, it was a lot better for us. And it turned out that hiking the desert is about my favorite place to hike that I've ever hiked. The water is manageable, you just have to carry more and learn how to deal with it. But there's so many positives about hiking in the desert that I just loved it. Here are a number of reasons that I love hiking in the desert. There's no mosquitoes, there's no humidity, there's no mud, it rarely rains. You can cowboy camp or camp without your rain fly, which makes setting up and taking down camp a lot quicker. Every day it seems like there's just a fantastic sunrise and sunset. The views are way better than I thought they would be. The mountains out there are just absolutely spectacular. So there's so many great things about hiking in the desert that just makes it awesome. And if you can adapt and make those adjustments to suit your hiking to the desert, it can be one of the best experiences that you'll ever have. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you're planning a PCT through hike or just doing a section of the desert, I'm hoping that you can use the information that I'm sharing, the ways that I adapted, and then you can make those adjustments yourself before you even get out there, so you're completely ready to enjoy that experience to the fullest. I loved hiking in the desert after the first week or so of dealing with some of the tougher parts and making the changes I needed to make. And I'm looking forward to getting out there again next year and can't wait for it. If you found any value in this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks, and we'll see you out on the trail.